Recording. Hey everybody, this is Chris Schweitzer, and I am talking with my good friend Falynn Koch today.
Hi.
And thank you very much for taking the time, Falynn.
Of course.
So you're up in. Oh,
I
sorry.
like our different backgrounds.
Yeah, yours
They're
is
very
very
like
like
us.
adulty, and mine is scattered stuff. You've got stuff on the walls, and you have a
Yeah.
sewing machine. Do you sew?
No.
No. Do you sew?
Tucker does actually.
Mm-hmm. I wish I knew how to sew. Penny got a sewing machine, and she's learning how to do stuff. And I want to swipe it and learn how to do stuff too.
It's possible.
I know it. I've got a punching bag down in the basement, and I don't use it because it's in the basement. And I want to move it to outside, but I need to make a waterproof case for it. So that's like top on my docket.
Okay.
Yeah. What does Tucker make? Just clothes,
He makes
stuff.
I think the last thing he made he added pockets to his work apron. His like carpenter's apron, I guess you would call it. I don't really know if there's an official name, but he added all sorts of loops and pockets, so he actually uses it quite a bit. And when we were younger, I would sew and he would sew, and we both would fix our jeans. That definitely I would just throw out as an adult, but when you're young, you're just like, I'll just put patches on it until it looks horrid. So it's a lot of patches.
Is that something you're supposed to stop doing as an adult?
I don't know.
I do it all, but I use liquid stitch because I don't know any other alternative.
Well, I'm like, I got the girl shape, so like my thighs will rub, and then like having holes in your thigh area, you just throw the pants out. But when I was younger, I'd be like, who cares if patches look weird there? It's like, no, they look weird in your crotch. Just throw the pants out.
I think that's fair. My big issue is it's usually the shirts or pants or jackets that I love the most, and so I don't want to get rid of them, which is why they're worn through. So
fair enough.
I don't know. You have you finished your new book?
Yes, and I can sort of talk about it.
Has it been announced?
It's not announced because it was delayed for so long that there's no official announcement date. It's going to get officially announced sometime in spring, and then they'll have an actual date that it comes out then. So I actually asked if I could talk about it, and I can, except for the fact that there's nothing to promote really. So I can be I'm doing one of the history books, and it's history of the Mustang in North America, but you can't. There's no preview pages. I don't have a date for you. I don't have...
Well, I'm looking at it less from a promotional standpoint and more from the standpoint of how did you do a book that's 90% horses?
I mean, I've always drawn horses.
You have?
Yeah, I used to ride horses.
What? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm actually, if I can toot my own horn, I'm actually a really good horseback rider. I used to ride English and Western, and I did competition and jumping and barrel racing and all that.
Well, Falynn, you are just a treasure trove of information. Actually, you're one of my favorite multi-hyphenate friends.
I tried to describe myself as that once, and I don't think Tucker thought that was he's because you live a mini life every year, but it's not like you're an expert on any of it. I'm yeah, I don't know. I feel like that phrase, the jack of all trades and master of none, is always so negative. I'm it's sort of fun to be a jack of all trades, though. I don't care if I master any of them. Do you know the whole thing?
Do you know the whole thing?
The whole thing?
Jack of all trades, master of none is often better than master of one?
No, what is it?
Oh, that's it. It's jack of all trades, master of none is oftentimes better than master of one or something.
Oh, I didn't know there was a second part to it. Okay, well now I just feel great about it.
It's meant to be a positive, I think. The phrase. So anyway, I will attribute it as a positive to you. So you have so before getting into the comics and before getting into drawing horses and things, you've done a lot of different stuff. So we met, I think, was I a grad student when we met?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was a grad student when we met, and you were an undergrad in Savannah at a different campus, but there was enough overlap between the campuses at that point in time that we saw each other relatively frequently.
Yeah, we've known each other for a really long time.
Yeah.
And then we got to know each other better when you were teaching grad school and I was going to grad school.
Yeah. You and Jackie were, I mean, I never really attributed a hierarchy to the teacher-student relationship in general, but y'all were sort of very strictly peers that came in and happened to be in the program at which I was teaching, which, and both of you acted like that, which is good. And most of the students did, I think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I felt like that was a good, I mean, I would have no idea what it would be like. I'd have to go back to know if there's some other vibe, but the vibe was very good. It was very like, we're all going to like treat this professionally and be peers and help each other out and pop in on each other's classes. And, you know, if somebody knows something, somebody doesn't, we'll figure it out and share that information. So that was, I don't know, I thought it was a really great vibe. I know everybody else didn't have that experience in grad school at their various times and places and things, but mine was great, and it was with you, and it was super fun.
Well, I enjoyed being in class with you, and you had some of the most interesting kind of, I hesitate to use the term deconstructionist because that tends to suggest an aloofness or a detachment or an irony to the project. Mm-hmm. And yours weren't. Yours were always very earnest. But you, more than anybody that I know, had the ability to take a genre, and sometimes it would be genres that you actively disliked as a challenge, and would try and sort of break it apart, see what worked about it, and conceive a story that would check all the genre boxes while doing something new. And I always loved getting to read your outlines and getting to talk those out with you and with the classes, because they were extraordinary, I thought.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I still have all those plots, and if I stopped doing all the science and the history and the DIY books, like as soon as those stopped and I wanted to try something else, I would definitely go back to them. But it's one of those things where when one pays the bills and the other one doesn't, it's sort of easy to shelf the outlines. But they're all still floating around, and I still think they're all good. Like they actually, and it's sort of nice that they weren't so fleshed out that like, be like, if you don't look at a project for a while, you go, oh my God, why would young me write this? This is terrible. But I think they're all still legit, and one day I'll bring them all out, but all the vampires and the zombies and the cowboys and the werewolves and all that.
Well, the vampire one especially, I thought was, of all, I mean, they were all, I thought, really promising. The vampire one I thought was my favorite. One of the things that I'm curious about is that D&D playing sort of factors into it. But this was 5 years before that recaptured the national zeitgeist.
Yeah, it would. If I brought it out now, it would look like I was trying to like jump on that. But I just thought it was like a good. I don't actually know how to play D&D. I'm so jealous of my friends who do. So yeah, I was like, that's how I felt about the character. Like he has to learn how to play D&D. I'm like, we'll learn together.
Well, I mean, and I wonder about whether or not that affects the viability of that project going forward. If you look at it and are like, well, does that become a factor, or because of the era in which it's set and because of the truth of the general concept, is that something you can still comfortably delve into?
I don't know. I mean, that's how writing is all the time, right? Like the reason that I thought vampires and D&D were a natural fit was because a lot of people who play D&D, they play it at night and they play it all night. So why wouldn't vampires like make friends and connect through something that was like sort of a nocturnal game? Yeah. And also involves a level of like fantasy where I think vampires would have fantasies about, daytime stuff or kind of characters that they would have. So, but at the same time, writing is writing, and if somebody was like, you can't use that game, it's not like there's not other stuff that people do for fun at night. You know what I mean? I feel like if somebody was just like, you can do this story, but we hate this D&D thing, if I was just like, I can't write something else, like what kind of plot or outline would that be if it couldn't change or become something else? So, I don't know. I feel like I picked it for a reason, and it suited the plot, but also if you can't change it, then you're just stuck. So,
I mean, I think it could still work, but that's something that I think about that story relatively, a couple times a month, and I'm like, that's a convenient story.
Okay, I should get into it.
And but that's something that occasionally springs to mind. So you haven't been doing much fiction since you started sort of publishing professionally.
I feel like all the work that I've done on all the like nonfiction stuff, if I go back to fiction, will actually help that, just because like everything is so streamlined, like how much I research and how much time I devote for the plot before you jump into it, and just knowing, you know, even if you research a genre or a time period or anything or science, you know, stuff, you'll never get it all the way right. And you're going to have to make some leeway, and you're going to have to change a few things just for the plot. So like, I don't know, I feel like I could bang them. Like if the next, I've got like 3 books contracted right now, which is great. But like once those end, if they're like no more books, I would be like, great, I'll just use all the skills I just did for all these, you know, science books and things like that, and just keep going. It'll just be fiction. So
yeah, I've done a fiction book, but I didn't write it, and I'm doing another one, and I'm not writing it. But the last 2 that I've written and drawn were both nonfiction, and I feel like after doing those, I'm like, fiction would be so much easier. In theory, the nonfiction should be, because, you know, you're just laying out the tracks and running along, but that has not been my experience.
I can't, and then the history book that I'm working on now, because the Mustangs one is finished, and I can talk about that a little bit, but I can't really talk about the next one yet because I just started. And I'm even telling.
I didn't know there was a next one, so I'm going to have to talk to you about it after we're done with the call, because I'm really curious.
But I was just joking last night when I was writing it. I was like, I had to redo this whole scene because I thought like the vibe that I was getting from these 2 guys in history, I'm like, oh, I bet they're enemies. This would be a really funny scene where like these 2 guys don't like each other. And then of course you like you check your sources and stuff, and it's like, these guys were friends. He recommended him for a job. And I'm like, no, it'd be so much funnier if these dudes hated each other. Like, so yeah, sometimes history, like stuff like, you know, like you feel like you could put your little fiction twist on it a little bit, and then when you double check it, you're like, no, facts, get these facts out of here. I hate these facts. Like,
so you've done so you've done 2, or you're working on your second history book. Mm-hmm. You did 1 DIY book, and you did 2 sciences. Yeah. Okay. So what were the science books?
Science books. So in order.
I mean, I know, but for the people listening.
Yeah. So the books that I've done in order are first, second science comics, Bats, first, second science comics, Plagues, and then the Maker, like DIY comics, the Bake Like a Pro book, and then the next one that will come out is first, second history about the Mustang, and then it'll be another history one, another science one, and another one that's sort of in the ether right now for what it's going to be.
Holy moly!
But I mean, I can't plan like a third book. That's going to be like in 3 years. It'll be like
I know it. I'm just you've got a very steady output. I get them done in a year. You give me so. Now now this output was sort of you sort of took a break with comics after grad school. For a while to be a chef and run a food truck.
I did. That was random.
There you go. I mean, it was neat. So you were in Atlanta. You moved to Savannah. How long were you in Savannah before you moved back up to Buffalo? Or were you in Buffalo or Philly? I forget.
Not that long. Because I bought that foreclosed house. So, like, to sell the house and just sort of move was about as random as buying it. And because it was foreclosed, it really didn't, like, hurt me financially to, like, get it. So I think I was only in Savannah, like, an extra year after grad school. Mm-hmm. And then when I moved back to Buffalo, I just, like, I mean, it has to do with a lot of things, which is, like, I wasn't getting a lot of, like, bigger jobs. I was trying out for a lot of stuff, but also I knew a lot of people who weren't just, like, making it in books, were like, big online and stuff like that, and I could never, I feel like a lot of people feel like this way. I can't tap online. Like, there's some people like, I posted a thing, and it's a fan art of Captain America, and it's like, wow, 1 million hits. I'll be like, I'll draw Captain America too. And people are like, no, not that way. Like, you know, like, like I never hit trends, or I'm not that. So like, I just sort of got burnt out trying to like be online too much. And it was sort of good because, like you said, I did the food truck thing. I worked in delis. I actually went to culinary school. And then by the time I got back into comics, I don't care what's happening online, really. Like, so it's great. Like, that break gave me, like, you know, it also helps when you have a job that you don't need to rely as online as much for. I mean, that's coming from a place where if I didn't have these books consistently, I might be singing a different tune. Mm-hmm. But as it is right now, like, I don't need, you know, it's a lot less stressful for me to not worry about, like, posting something every day or whatever. I try and, like, be a part of the online community. But for the most part, that break was great because then I could just get back into, like, actually making comics instead of, like, worrying about all the other little stuff that you have to do. I like all the other little stuff, but I hate worrying about it.
Well, and at that point, did you find that you're just sort of getting a little bit older, having time to process stuff that you had done when you were younger and stuff that you had learned in school and things like that? Did that make for an easier sort of jump back in and feel like you knew what you were doing? Did you feel like you knew what you were doing more than when you stopped doing it? Or was there kind of like a relearn, or was it just picking up where you left off?
It's different because, like, I actually think my art was better in grad school, but that's because I had so much more time to, like, carefully put the black and the white on there and carefully do everything. And then when you, like, get a book for your first time with a real deadline and a real publisher and all this stuff, and, like, you just have to get it done because at the end of the day, you know, like, each panel should make sense and things should go where they're supposed to. And some people have, like, a really great, like instinct for where all the black and the white goes. And sometimes you just have to get it done. Mm-hmm. So I think it was like, I'd like it if I had, I almost wonder if I had more time to do each book, would I do them any differently? I probably would just, like, barrel through. I mean, not barrel through, but you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't. Yeah. I found it to not be so precious as I thought it was in grad school, and I think that's a good thing. I need to find, like, the happy medium. Like, I really like the pace that I make these books, but also, you know, just cranking them out doesn't afford, like, when you look at some people's work and you're just like, how much of this is them planning it and how much of this is instinct, and can I retrain myself for my instincts to be better when I'm planning out a comic page? And I just don't have time to practice all those instincts right now.
Yeah.
So I'm just sort of like, I'm at a level that I like, and I might just stay there. But, you know, in the back of your mind as an artist, you're always like, gotta level up. Like,
do you still thumbnail, or do you sort of go right to you do?
Still thumbnail.
Okay.
Yeah. I get that some people don't, but I just feel like I need feedback from whoever my editor is or whoever the writer is. I just don't. I feel like if I don't get feedback in the beginning with the thumbnails, that I'm going to start inking and it's going to be a real nightmare, and then it's so much harder to change then. I mean, that's why people do thumbnails. So yeah, I still thumbnail the whole thing. I used to still do them by hand. I just do everything digitally now, though. So
I've slowed down a lot. Like, I used to be real barrel through-y, and I still am with certain books. So, like, the Roanoke, like, I barreled through initially, and then there were, you know, a year's worth of rework stuff. But I'm not being as precious with the art on that because, one, it's printing dramatically smaller. It's meant to be simpler. But I found that I'm slowing down a lot on just drawing in general. Like, whereas used to be I would sort of treat a drawing the same way I would treat a comic panel and just sort of knock it out and be like, well, what's needed in this drawing? Now I will rework until it's as close to perfect as I can make it. And that's mostly to stave off being unhappy with it shortly down the road. Because I'll reuse stuff, you know, either for the wooden figures or for posters or whatever else. And I know that if I'm going to have it on hand more than once, and if I'm going to see it, then I want to have done my all because I'm going to notice all the problems if I didn't. And I don't want that stuff to keep popping up and bugging me.
Your style style like changed a lot. Not a lot. It's always your style. Nobody's style really changes.
It still has that. I mean, it has.
Yours has changed over the years too. So
I think everybody's does to some degree, but mine and whether or not you lose something in that change is fair. Like my proportions have gotten a lot more natural.
Yeah, I don't know. I think slowing down for you has gotten better. It's the reason that I look back on my stuff and still like it is because it felt like nobody had any time. Nobody feels like they have time in grad school. But looking back on it, I'm like, oh my God, we took that
nothing but
5 pages. My God, what a vacation. Like, but at the time it was, it felt stressful. But like, I feel like that's the only reason that I don't look back on like my older work and not like it is because I was forced to slow down, whereas like you were working and teaching and stuff back then. So like your pace was your pace back then. And I think slowing down is a good thing. So
it is. And I mean, and there's trade-offs with it. My output is considerably less. I mean, I guess I'm still averaging a book a year, but I don't know, maybe.
We'll say that.
But it doesn't feel like it feels like I'm producing dramatically less, even though I don't think I am. It's just the stuff comes out so much longer after when I finish it that I don't really count that within the output.
Then that's always frustrating. You don't pick when they come out really.
Yeah.
With publishers and stuff, and I think people don't realize this. Like when I did Bats and then Plagues, like those felt like they came out. I mean, they did come out back to back, but I didn't draw them like back to back. Really, like just like that's when they came out. So it looked like I was like super productive. Like like it's just not. I always try, and then I have to do that thing that I hate. Where when somebody doesn't understand how the comics industry works, you have to compare it to film. As if anybody has any more experience in film. Like, as if anybody's grandma knows how movies are made. But, like, if you go, grandma, it's like with movies where the movie's done filming, but it doesn't go out into the theaters until later. They go, oh! Or, like, no, actually, my grandma would know that. But you know what I mean? Like, as if people you're talking to have ever made a movie. But for some reason, if you put it in terms of, like, oh, in comics, we audition too, just like an actor for a role, but it's for a book. They go, oh, it's like, I don't understand why I had to explain it like that. But you do sometimes. So, yeah. I always have to talk about how the comic doesn't come out when the comic's done. The comic comes out when it's released, you know? Like,
now, you mentioned working digitally. Do you work on a computer, on a tablet? Does it vary?
I do all the books on the tablet, and then anytime I get any other kind of work, like illustration work or anything like that, I do that by hand so that I still, like anytime I do my own promotional stuff, like buttons or pins or spot illustrations or anything like that, I always do that all by hand just so I don't, like, I guess you don't really lose the skill. But
I've lost that skill.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'll still do stuff at conventions, and that's about it. But I do all of my penciling. If I'm at home, I do all my penciling digitally now, and then I'll print it out and light box it if it's going to be a physical thing that somebody gets that's painted. But I still I tweak those pencils and tweak them and tweak them and tweak them, and I wonder. I look back at some, especially environmental stuff, and I'm like, my environmental stuff was a lot livelier when I did it by hand. And was less precise. So I don't know. There again, trade-offs on everything, and I think that keeping now that I've found I'm better at doing it digitally than I am on paper, I'm just like rather than try to get better at paper, I'm just like, never mind.
There's only so many hours in the day. Don't worry about it. No, I still have like a sketchbook, but it's been all Star Trek.
I see those. You post those. So you rewatch. So I think I understand the end that you rewatch all of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Every time you start a new book, just as background stuff.
Like I won't read. Like I just finished the Mustangs one. I'm just starting the next one. So like while I'm doing the script, I'm not going to be watching anything. Yeah. And usually in pencils, I don't watch anything either. But when it's time to ink and color, I just start where I left off. So like. I don't like, and I'm not under, I watch Star Trek and I doodle Star Trek and I talk about Star Trek for fun. So if I don't go back to it for like 3 months or 6 months, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, I pick it up where I left off and I watch it all by star date, which means some of the series and the movies and things you have to watch out of order.
Okay.
Like towards the end of the Next Generation and when DS9 picks up and when Voyager is happening, some of that stuff all happens at the same time. So I literally watch like,
do you have like a spreadsheet? Does somebody
happens, and then you have to watch this episode of DS9, and now Discovery is happening at CBS, and then Picard's happening now. So like, I will figure it out. But yeah, I do it. I've rewatched most of it. Every book. It's getting. I don't think I'm ever going to watch Enterprise ever again.
You read all the Star Trek books too?
No, I don't read the books or the comics.
Oh, really. I thought you just said I read every book.
Oh no!
You redo it every book.
Sorry, just
okay.
Accidentally.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I haven't rewatched most of the Next Generation since I was in middle. I feel like I watched everything once, and that's
all you need.
that was all I need. I watched Voyager. Like I want to say like the first episode of Voyager. Do they like go back in time to like a plantation or something?
No, it looks like that, but it's because some like space sort of godlike thing makes them think that they are on like a farm, but they're not. They're just totally in space.
Well, here's the thing. As a kid who grew up in the South and had to visit a lot of plantations, they went there, and I was like, "This is my exotic escapism. I am out." And that was the end of Voyager for me. I was like, I don't need to go to a Shaker village or whatever.
Or something.
Yeah. Yeah, those are fun. You post sketches on occasion and things along those lines.
Yeah, that's what keeps me sketching in the actual sketchbook is like, I guess I'll just pick a theme, like stick with it. So.
Now, when I guess something that I'm curious about is, I want to talk more about those horses, really quick. So you drew horses as a kid?
Yeah.
Were you like a horse kid? Like you were just, you had the Breyer ponies and stuff like that?
To a degree, yeah, I was. But unlike most horse girls or horse kids, I think when I got to high school, I was like, I have to make a real choice on if this is going to be the rest of my life or not. Mm-hmm. And the answer by the time I got out of high school was no, it's not. But I mean, there's just so much that goes into it, and there's so much equipment. It's one of those, horse riding is one of those things where you can make it as cheap or as expensive as you want. If you want to sit on a horse with no saddle, that required nothing. But if you want to do all the shows and win the ribbons, there's a lot of money. So it's like anything else. But I was just sort of like, I'm good. I think I still have the ribbons somewhere in the basement because my mom didn't even want them. I'm just like, what am I going to do with these things?
My dad took all my old karate trophies and just drilled them to the side of the cabin. So they're just,
oh, that's funny,
up there outside, all melted in the sun. I think I had them in a car trunk for like a year and a half, and they all melted because, cheap plastic. And so there's like the marbly part, and then the punchy guys are all like, they look like Sid from Toy Story got a hold of them.
I know that my sibling got one of those rubber horse masks and went to a party where it was like animal themed and like took all my ribbons and was like covered. Like it was like, can I use these ribbons for a costume? I was like, yeah, you're gonna. That's more use than they've gotten in years, and I guess it was just like covered in the ribbons. So.
Did this come up in your? Did you do your about the author thing? Anytime I do an about the author,
but I totally have to mention that I rode horses, right?
Yeah, you have to. Like anytime I do those, I try as much as I can to tie it to the subject matter of the book, because I'm like I think it's fun, and B, you want to give kids a framework through which to view. Or at least I like to, through which to view the fact that whatever their life experience is can have bearing on the other stuff. And so I think that's kind of fun. But
actually, when I was in Kentucky, I went to like the horse museum. It's like partly the history of the horse and partly like our relationship with the horse. But I didn't know I was going to do the book yet. I just like went to it because I like ponies and whatever. And Tucker was like he'd actually had a good time, but he didn't think he was going to. But either way, you know, I saw like how they got the horses on the ships and how we tamed the horse and how ancient people, like their religion with the horse. And then like I got the book like a month later and I was like, well, I would have been taking notes. Like, I would have, or put it as a business expense.
This is all recontextualizing horse conversations that we had at cons, where you'd be like, Chris, did you know that horses XYZ? And you would tell me an interesting thing about horses, and I was just like, oh, Falynn must have watched a horse documentary. No, Falynn was a diehard horses.
Ponies.
Yeah.
I think I always, you know, we probably talked about. I always love going to this. Everybody. I don't know how this comes up a lot, but like anytime someone goes like, how come we don't ride zebras? I'm like, oh, I'll tell you. Like, I'm here. So yeah, I always go with that. Like, well, I'm like, I'll tell you why we ride the horse over the zebra. Well, like, please, sit down.
Please do. You've got me. Oh,
you wanted to?
I don't know that I've heard that one. Yeah.
Oh, it's because
is it that zebras don't sweat?
No. Horses. Well, okay. So the horse in general is like one of those like, you can't believe it was put on Earth and we figured out how to ride it because it's perfect for it, because their backs are super, super stiff. They can hold a lot of weight. They sweat way more than other hoofed animals, so you could ride them really far, whereas like an antelope would just die after a couple miles. You can't do that. They're just like the way that their collarbone is shaped and all the stuff you can put like, obviously you invent like the harness and stuff for the animal too, but also you just like can't do some of the stuff that we do with horses with other animals, including the zebra. But that's also a matter of domestication, because the reason we don't ride zebras and we've domesticated the horse is because zebras, even though they're in a herd and there's thousands of them, it's not a herd like how horses have a herd. They're just hanging out together. And like when they panic, they all move in one direction that seems like the right direction, but they don't have like a leader. And they don't have like smaller family groups and things like that. Whereas horses, they have they have like a larger herd, and within that herd, there's smaller groups, and those have leaders, and you know, and they know each other and they're friends. So therefore, you can take that, and when you domesticate an animal and you give them authority as a person, they know what authority is. Where like a zebra doesn't answer to anybody. It doesn't have, you know,
so it's more temperament than physicality.
Yeah, exactly.
Because in my mind, they're basically just donkeys with stripes.
Yeah, zebras have a herd, but they don't have like a leader of that herd, so you can't like force them to think about people as their leader. Whereas like horses, really, if you train them right, really do respond to like the things that you do, because they're used to responding to like their friends and their leaders and stuff. And zebras don't have friends, basically. Yeah. It comes down to zebras. Zebras don't have friends like horses have friends, so you can't use it.
So when you're doing a horse book or something like that, so you're working with most of these. You have written, or all of your first, second books up until this point, you have written.
Yeah, Chris Duffy.
This is your first one you're doing collaboratively.
Yeah. Chris Duffy wrote the Mustangs one, and I just sort of jumped in on that. So
did that make it easier or harder? Like, or were there again trade-offs?
It was different. I definitely learned a lot about the human. I like know a lot about like the physicality of horses and stuff like that, but I didn't know as much about like the human relationship with horses. So that was like it's nice. It's nice to work with a writer and like learn new things. Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing about working with a writer, I think, in general, is they'll force you to draw stuff that you would never force yourself to draw because they don't care. And that's not a bad thing. I just mean, like, if you told me, like, hey, you're going to draw old wooden ships with horses on the old wooden ships, and the horses have to be in, like, these containers almost, so you're going to draw that all in perspective. Like, you're going to draw that. I would be like, no, I'm not. Like, but that's in the script, and you do, and you force yourself to do it. And I learned how to draw some old wooden ships, and if I was writing the script, I would probably just like I'd just be like, and then they arrived. Like, no one had to draw anything. Great. Like, you know, so I feel like that's just what happens when you work with a writer. Like, if you can't draw people in hats on bicycles, they'll be like, oh my gosh, in the script there's the annual people with hats on bicycles race, and you're like, no. So that's why I like working with writers sometimes, because you force yourself to draw a bunch of stuff that you just sort of out of instinct might not write in your script, because you're sort of like, I don't really want to draw that crowd scene. Whereas like they don't care to make you draw the crowd scene.
See, for me, a lot of times it's less that I wouldn't draw something and more that I wouldn't conceive of the something to draw.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, there's like this, like, there's nothing on purpose I wouldn't draw, but I feel like if I'm writing a script, there's going to just be my likes and dislikes. And so, like, you want to draw what you're excited about, and you want to write what you're excited about, and, like, those are your likes. So it's not so much that I think about not wanting to draw something as I just worry about, like, I don't think you can, like I said, you want to draw the things that you're excited about. You don't want to write about stuff or draw stuff that you think is a bummer all the time. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean like tonally. I mean, like, sometimes you have to write like sad things. I just mean like, you know, whatever like keeps you motivated. That's sort of where it like ends up. So that's why I like writing with a writer, because they don't care about that. You just get it, and you like have to like work with all like the cool, like the imagery that they want you to work with. And I think that's like a really great challenge. So I really I liked it. It was just, it was definitely different. It's definitely not like grad school where you're just like swapping little stories and they're all like 5 pages. And then like you get the script and you're like, here's 120 pages of something you can't change. Here you go. It's like, okay, thanks.
Well, cool. and that's something that I kind of want. And, you know, and I used to fret over this because I hadn't done any collaborative work on the art side until I did Mars Attacks, and I reframe my dialogue so frequently in order to better accommodate word balloons that I thought that it would really be that I'd really be inclined to try and change dialogue or whatever else, because how else would I make it fit? And I didn't have to do it at all. And then that got me wondering, well, then am I stressing over it in my own stuff for no good reason? Like, you know what I mean? Like working with a writer, sometimes it kind of made me rethink some of the things that I have hang-ups about, because when I wasn't hung up about them, even if I would have done it very differently, I found that it didn't affect the overall quality of the book.
I found that what I ended up asking Chris to do a lot is not to get rid of dialogue, because that's his dialogue and that's the end of the day, but I would ask if I could split things, like be like, can I put this in 2 word balloons, not just for like composition of the page, but also like for sort of, you know, tonal and dialogue stuff. Like if it sounds better if someone pauses a little bit rather than makes it feel like, here's all the information that's going down, you know, like in one big word balloon. Yeah. So I asked to do that a lot. I was like, can we put the split like right here? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I felt the same way, which is like, I do the same thing, which is like when you're rewriting it, you go, oh, that word balloon's pretty big. So I'll just get rid of all the, I put the word just in there too much. Yeah. And then he just went to the store. No, stop it. Just go to the store. Don't need the word, like, so that, you know, you proofread your own stuff down to the bare bones, but it was what you're saying, like, sort of nice to be like, here's the script, and this is what they're going to say, and that's the end of the story. That's what they do. So that was, it's a double-edged sword, but I like it in general. So.
How do you feel about the idea of writing for other people?
I don't know if I could, just because of what you just said, where it's like when I work on my own stuff and I can tweak it later. Because I was talking to somebody, I forget who it was, but they were talking about it. Like, they're like, oh no, I like just try and find the right solution for what the writer gives me, no matter how much I think it's weird or wrong at first. Like I can't remember who I was talking about. They were like, if they say that many panels, that's how many. I don't go back to them and ask. Whereas, like, I do all the time. I'll be like, oh, if this was split, I think it'd be funnier because we could put a pause. And I would worry that if I wrote a script, somebody wouldn't feel like they could, like, ask me, because that's just not some people's style. You know what I mean? Like, not because I, like, feel like I'll be like, no, like, my word is my word, but because, like, be like, you know, we can change stuff. It'll be fun. Or if they don't want to, because that'll make it a longer process. Like, that's once your script's out there, it's like how they want to do it, and I just don't feel confident enough in like all my panel choices because they change like 5 billion times.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I would say yes, just because I like a challenge, but it would be a real sweaty yes to writing a script for somebody else.
When on the books that you write, do you write an actual script first, or do you do the script in thumbs?
I do the script, and of course, like the script that you hand in digitally, like that you did on Word, doesn't show. I actually print out the script a lot, and then do little doodles next to it. Like I print it out like so tiny, it's in like 8-point font, so I don't have to like waste a bunch of paper, like double-sided. But then I'll go back through my script like one more time and actually like personally thumbnail or see how many panels are going to work with that real loose
before turning it in,
and then turn in like a final draft.
Okay.
But I turn in a script, so
gotcha.
I mean that sounds like it probably adds a bunch more time, but to me, that's time I would have spent later second guessing it again anyway. So why not do it then? So
yeah, I can't do scripts. I did scripts once, and I never actually finished that book. Oh. Because it just felt like an uphill climb trying to make the pacing work, trying to do everything else. Like it's just, now I didn't write it by panel. I just wrote a dialogue script.
Okay.
And that's probably
do it by panel and everything, and then I throw it all out. No.
Yeah.
No, the script that I'm working on for the history book that I'm working on now is going to be a challenge because like I always like making things funny when they can be, but this one specifically is like it's one of those history events where, I guess without giving too much away, it's one of those history events where there's a lot of info for adults, tons of books for adults. If you want to learn about all these dudes that I'm talking about, there's tons of stuff. And then for kids, there's only like for the youngest people, and then there's nothing in between. So it's a weird thing in the script where I want it to be super fun so that they want to go research some more stuff because I can't fit everything in. I can't fit the entire history of everything in 120 pages. Mm-hmm. And there's so much more info out there that's written more for adults. I need to like figure out the right like combo of like enough info to whet their appetite and also be funny where they like want to learn more and like all this stuff. So this one's going to be it'd be easier if it was a subject that like nobody had heard of before, because then I'm like trying to find like the right amount of information for 12-year-olds is interesting. The tone's always easy, just go funny.
Yeah. Well, and with that funny, with the nonfiction and things like that, are there, do you have any conscious influences on the way that you tackle nonfiction? Like, for me, I think about Larry Gonick a lot in the Cartoon History of the Universe, and how he kind of has factual info and then silly silly commentary by the character in the illustration. I don't always do that, but I do think about that when I'm doing that. Do you have anything like that you draw from, things that you read as a kid or as an adult? Yeah,
I mean, the big one, and I think that a lot of people know this one, is like Hark a Vagrant, mm-hmm. because like I'm trying to like figure out if I really like that style where I know these characters didn't really say that. Like, they're not saying your mom to each other, you know what I mean? Yeah. But I'm also an adult and I know about these people and I know like the context of like the literary jokes or joke about Copernicus or whatever. So mm-hmm. I'm trying to figure out with this book, how much of the dialogue can you make funny for the sake of being funny if your reader might not know enough about it to know that you're just having a laugh about it. Yeah. So I'm trying to find the right balance of like, these guys really said this versus this guy's calling somebody a jerk, whereas like he wouldn't have used those words, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, so, and sometimes I just try and think about stuff that I like tonally. Like, I was thinking about Arrested Development, how it has that whole like the narrator being like, "No, it wasn't." I did that in the Roanoke book. It was like, they're so leaving.
Good, almost all my dialogue is sort of paraphrased contemporary, and so yeah, I've got one of the guys leaving. And he's like, "I'll be back by Easter. Don't screw everything up." And the next guy's like, "I won't." And then there's a little narration caption that he did, and so yeah. But yeah,
I try and figure out. I'm trying to figure out what kind of comedic tone and how visually it's going to work. So this is going to be fun. History is a pain because everything is everything is context. History is lies. History is whose diary. So people write lies in their own diaries. You know what I mean? So history is weird. And so it's hard to find the right tone where it's if I'm just making up all their dialogue, how will anybody reading it know what was based on fact or not? So I'm trying to figure out
with this one, is this a time period that is relatively self-contained and you can deal predominantly with the narrative, or are you having to contextualize everything and lend a lot of page count to that contextualization?
So the main chunk of it is in, I would say, the early 1900s, especially the 19-teens, the 1910s, I guess you would say. But in order to have context for that time period, I did have to go back. So I definitely have to just in terms, so it's not 8 million pages long. I definitely need to pick a narrator that can gloss over some stuff so we could just hit this time period, and then I can just let it be a story without some narrator interrupting every 5 seconds. So that's what I'm going for. Is we're trying to speed through all the early stuff, get right to the meat of it, and then speed out. That's how I want the. We'll see. I mean, I'm in the early stages right now, but so that's what I'm aiming for. But we're gonna see if it looks like that by the time I do 8,000 drafts of it. So
now, potentially unlike, maybe not unlike the science ones, but with the history is, holy moly, sorry, just saw a truck fishtailing all down the street. Come on, guy, it's wet. Are you finding yourself in a position where you are either the story demands it or you are inclined to editorialize the things that are happening? Are you taking a sort of an ideological stand in the way that you're presenting the info? Because the presentation of this type of stuff is in itself, I think it's unavoidable, and I think anybody who says that it's avoidable and you can present it clinically, I think is self-delusional. But
I'm trying to find this so the things that are going to happen in the book, and the reason that I picked this time period, and I wish I could talk more about it, is because I feel from 1890 to 1920 was a free-for-all in America of people trying anything, just in advertising, in all sorts of stuff, and when these what would have been billionaires to us are just the Rockefellers. There's just crazy people, and Teddy Roosevelt and all this stuff. There's just people that just are, when you find out about all the stuff that they did and some of the stuff that they don't talk about in history books, these people are insane. And the stuff that they tried to get their way is nuts. The smear campaigns that they would do were the physical acts, I'm just going to go, Teddy Roosevelt was I'm just going to go get my horse and do whatever I want. And I guess I'm trying, I don't agree with these stuff. I think these are mostly in this time period, the 1910s and stuff. I think these are mostly bad men. The railroad barons and the oil barons and all the people that tried to sell all this, borax to people and all this stuff, and they wouldn't tell you what was in it, nor did they care or know. That kind of stuff. To me, these are not good people, but I sort of have to explain in the book that they didn't think that they were bad people.
Yeah.
And why they didn't think that they were bad people. People who are just oh my God, well, oh my God, part of it takes place at the World's Fair in 1910 in San Francisco, if I'm getting the year right.
Okay. I don't know that one doesn't come up as much as the Chicago one.
Yeah, the San Francisco one was not as big as the Chicago one, but I mean, some of the it's the same kind of stuff where it's you'd have a pavilion and it would be it's Africa land, and it's uh-oh, this is gonna be bad. and like, but people like honestly had no, like they knew that they were being exploitative, but they just were like, but it's just to make a buck. We're all doing it, and you're just like, oh my god, like, don't make dollars that way, dude. Stop
now, are you tempted to draw corollaries between time period then and time period now?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is that if I don't, you know, like there are definitely people who did stuff only to make money, and there's people that only do that now, you know, and then there's people who really thought that if they could just get their way, it would make a difference for everybody in a better way in the long run. And I think there's like, and there is a distinction, and I think like people talk about that a lot now, where it's like, or even online and stuff like that, like, oh, people just have this headline to get clicks, but it's like, but if they get them to read their article, maybe there's something better in there or something like that. But it's like, well, that's not how you should do it. Yeah. So I guess there's a lot of correlation with that, where it's just like, oh, if this guy gets everybody in the door, or they all read this newspaper article or whatever, isn't that okay? Because then they'll learn about this greater thing. And it's like, I don't know if it's okay or not. But these issues still exist now, where it's like, does the ends justify the means? You know, that kind of thing. So I think that's going to be a big part of it. It's just that time period being like, you know, there are people that are truly evil and know it, and then there's people who, like, in context, when you look back in time, be like, they didn't know any better. And so, you know, and how much of that can be an excuse? Yeah. Did they really not know better, or are they just jerks? So there's going to be a lot of stuff. It's a weird time period with a lot of rich jerks. So, I don't want to write a book about all jerks, but there were some really great people back then too. So I'm trying to not also just write about only the pure characters back then. Like, you know, I'm trying not to just write about, what was I learning about? So I will say this, like the, you know, like Gifford Pinchot versus like John Muir's philosophies. So Gifford Pinchot was like, he basically started the Forestry Service, which eventually became land management.
Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about, yeah. Yeah,
and it's really easy to be like, well, this guy wants to chop down trees, and John Muir wants to keep them up. So John Muir is an angel baby, and Gifford Pinchot is an evil guy. And that's really easy, and that's fun to do. So I'm trying to avoid like stuff like that, because Gifford Pinchot, I mean, he was highly educated. He really loved forests. He really loved trees. But his whole thing was that if you stop these men from getting what they want, they'll destroy everything. Yeah. So you have to find a way to give them a little bit of what everybody wants, which I don't agree with. I'm more John Muir, where it's like, that forest you can't knock down, and that's the end of it. You can't like knock down just a little bit of it, like just a little bit as a treat. Like, yeah, so it's easy to make someone like the good guy and the bad guy in that, but you know, contextually, it was a time when people were just logging everything and doing whatever, and at least Pinchot was just like, no, we can slow this down, we can research the trees, we can do more science, and we can like figure out a way that we're all happy.
And in theory, you know, again, looking back at the context, and with the railroad barons basically doing whatever they want, and and everybody else. You know, he's got a point where they could just be like, well, tough, you know, like, we'll send in our own, like, private army and do it, you know, because that was the thing that was done. So I mean, I can.
I don't know. So it's a weird time period. I'm trying to like not make anybody into too much of a bad guy, even though I think that they're bad guys, but also make it funny, but also not make it too funny where it doesn't seem like any of this really happened. Like, history's weird. History's just weird. The end.
Well, Falynn, thank you so much for taking time to do this talk. And if people want to check out your stuff, what are some things that they can do?
I mean, there's my really, really basic ass website. That's just FalynK.com.
And Falynn is Falynn? Yes.
So, FALYNN, no space, no anything like that. So, FalynK.com. And It's not the prettiest website, but it will get you the info you need, and there are links to my books, and you can find all those books on Amazon, and you just have to, the last name is Koch, even though it's pronounced Cook, it looks like Koch, so just FYI. But yeah, I mean, I just do the basic stuff, a little Instagram, a little things like that, so if people want to follow me on there, they're going to get a lot of pictures of my dogs and a lot of drawings about Star Trek, because the way that these books work is you can't really talk about them too much until they announce them. So it's a lot of random stuff. But yeah, my website or Instagram or things like that. Everything's my name. It's all Falynn Koch. So
okay. Well, thank you so very much, Val. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.